Bulger was not himself at all, dear friends. There was a lackluster look in his eyes, and his tail responded with only a half-hearted wag when I spoke to him. I say half-hearted, for I always had a notion that the other end of Bulger's tail was fastened to his heart. His appetite too had gone down with his spirits, and he rarely did anything more than sniff at the dainty food which I set before him, although I tried to tempt him with fried chicken's livers and toasted cock's combs, two of his favourite dishes. There was evidently something on his mind, and yet it never occurred to me what that something was. For to be honest about it, it was something which of all things I never should have dreamed of finding there. Possibly I might have discovered at an earlier day what it was all about, had it not been that just at this time I was very busy. Too busy, in fact, to pay much attention to anyone, even to my dear four-footed foster brother. As you may remember, dear friends, my brain is a very active one, and when once I become interested in a subject, Castle Trump itself might take fire and burn until the legs of my chair had become charred before I would hear the noise and confusion or even smell the smoke. It so happened at the time of Bulger's low spirits that the elder Baron had, through the kindness of an old school friend, come into possession of a 15th century manuscript from the pen of a no less celebrated thinker and philosopher than the learned Spaniard, Don Constantino Bartolomeo Strepolophidjeguanerius Fum, commonly known among scholars as Don Fum. Entitled, this work advanced the marvellous theory that the interior of our world is inhabited, that, as is well known, this vast earth ball is not solid but in many places quite hollow, that ages and ages ago terrible disturbances had taken place on its surface, forcing its inhabitants to seek refuge in these vast underground chambers, so immense in fact as well to merit the name of. This book, with its crumpled, torn and time-stained leaves, exhaling the odours of vaulted crypts and worm-eaten chests, exercised a peculiar fascination upon me. All day long, and often far into the night, I sat poring over its musty and mildewed pages, quite forgetful of this surface world. My mind was sinking into these subterranean depths. My imagination was gazing upon and listening to the dwellers therein. While I would be thus engaged, Bulger's favourite position was on a quaintly embroidered leather cushion, one I had brought back from the Orient on one of my journeys. From this spot, he could command a full view of the park, the terrace, and the long drive leading up to the porte cochere. One day, my attention was drawn away from my reading by Bulger, suddenly leaping down from his cushion and giving a low growl of displeasure. At first I paid little heed, but to my surprise, the next day, about the same hour, it occurred again. Curiosity now fully aroused, I hastened to the window to learn the cause of Bulger's irritation. And lo, the secret was out. There stood half a dozen mongrel curs from the tenantry of the baronial lands looking up toward the window. Barking, prancing, tails wagging, they sought to entice Bulger outside for a romp. Dear friends, need I assure you that such familiarity was extremely distasteful to Bulger? Their impudence was just a little more than he could stand. I rang my bell and directed my servant to drive them away. Satisfied, Bulger resumed his seat by the window. The next morning, just as I had settled in for a long read, Bulger bounded into the room, eyes flashing fire, teeth bared in anger. He seized the skirt of my dressing gown and tugged with such force that I could no longer ignore him. He led me downstairs across the hallway and into the dining room. There, grouped around his silver breakfast plate, sat an ancient tabby cat and 4 kittens, all calmly licking and lapping away at his breakfast. Looking up into my face, Bulger uttered a sharp, complaining howl as if to say,
"There, little master, look at that. Canst thou wonder that I am not happy with all these disagreeable things happening to me? I tell thee, little master, it is too much."
I thought so too, and did all in my power to comfort my unhappy companion. But then something extraordinary happened. Bulger refused to return to his cushion. Instead, he dashed into my sleeping quarters and began dragging out my belongings one by one. First, my oriental shoes, then a sash, a robe. In a few moments, there lay before me a complete oriental costume. It was the very suit I had worn on my last great journey, when he and I had been wrecked on the island of Gagula, the land of the round bodies. And then I understood.
Little master, canst thou not understand thy dear Bulger? He is weary of this dull existence. He implores thee to break away from this life of reverie and inaction. For the honor of the trumps, be up and away again.
Stooping down, I wound my arms around my dear Bulger.
Yes, I understand thee now, faithful companion. And I promise thee that before this moon has filled her horns, we shall once more turn our backs on Castle Trump. Up and away in search of Don Foom's world within a world.
Bulger erupted in joyful barking, bounding wildly about the room. At that very moment, a gentle knock came at my chamber door.
Well, little Baron, what thinkest thou of Don Foom's?
I think, my lord, that Don Foom is right, and with thy consent I shall seek out its portals.
Then go forth, my son. The honor of our family calls us to be strong-hearted.
At these words, the gracious Baroness entered.
Go, my dear son, and heaven bring thee safely back to our arms in its own good time.
Tears pressed against her eyelids, yet she held them back. She embraced me tightly, and thus my fate was sealed. Servants bustled through the castle. Excitement filled the halls. The whispers began. "The little Baron is leaving home again," Bulger barked wildly with joy. And so, dear friends, with heart full of adventure, I set forth once more.